After years of torment from my stepmother and my father's indifference, the unthinkable is happening. He's now threatening to skip my wedding because I won't invite her. Can you believe it? I'm about to get married in just a couple of months, and I'm drowning in confusion, torn between the love I have for my father and the reality I'm facing. My fiancé, Caleb, and I have been dreaming about this day for months. We're both 25, just two people who've been in love since high school. But when it came time to send out the wedding invitations, I knew one thing for certain: my parents would be invited, but not my stepmother. It wasn't even a tough decision. She's a nightmare, and I wouldn't wish her presence at my wedding for anything. The woman has a way of turning every moment into something dark, and I refuse to let that happen on one of the happiest days of my life. Jan, my stepmother, is 47 now. She married my father when I was in 8th grade, after my parents divorced when I was very young. I had spent most of my childhood with shared custody, half the month at my dad's and the other half with my mom. It was a good arrangement, and I was happy with it. Neither of them dated anyone seriously until Jan came into the picture. When they started dating, it didn't seem like a big deal. She was pleasant, even likable when I first met her. But that didn't last long. Slowly, over time, she began to change around me, her demeanor shifting into something colder, more distant, and it was as if I could feel her resentment, even if she never said it outright. At first, I tried to brush it off, but eventually, it became impossible to ignore. Every time I entered a room, she would make faces, roll her eyes, or act like I was an inconvenience. I was just a kid, but that didn't stop her. I learned quickly to be as invisible as possible, avoiding her, tiptoeing around her anger. But it only got worse. When she and my father got engaged, she became outright cruel. She'd pick on me at any opportunity, often behind my dad's back, but once they were married, her attacks were open and relentless. It felt like she was doing everything she could to make me feel like I didn't belong. She destroyed my self-esteem, piece by piece. I never understood why. I was just a kid, and yet she acted like I was a threat, like I was competing for something that didn't even make sense, her place in my father's life, perhaps. And then there was the way she talked about my mother, horrible things, things that made my blood boil. Of course, when I confronted her, it was always my fault. My dad, the man who should have been protecting me, stood by her. He defended her, even when she was blatantly mistreating me, saying that I was just too much, that I tried too hard, that she was only trying to help me. That excuse didn't fool me. I knew what was happening. He refused to see it, blinded by whatever twisted version of reality he'd created around her. I tried talking to him, time and time again, but his response was always the same: I was the problem. He would say that I was important to him, but so was she, and somehow, I had to learn to get along with her. He wasn't ready to give up either of us, and it didn't matter that I was suffocating under the weight of her cruelty. He couldn't, or wouldn't, see the truth. But at that time, I just wanted to have a relationship with my dad. I was willing to endure Jan's poison just to make him happy. I wanted my family back, wanted everything to return to the way it had been before she entered the picture. So I stayed, taking her insults and her bullying, hoping that maybe, just maybe, things would get better. I never told my mom about any of this. The thought of her fighting for full custody terrified me. What if I lost my father forever? I'd been through enough. I couldn't handle the idea of him turning his back on me. So I stayed silent. I tried to keep the peace, to make Jan's life as easy as possible, all while walking on eggshells, constantly afraid of triggering her next outburst. Looking back, I realized just how hard it was to grow up in my father's house. But I somehow got through it, even after leaving home. I stayed close to my dad, still hoping that we could make things work. Maybe it was foolish, but I was still attached to him, and I couldn't picture a life without him in it. I did my best to maintain a relationship with him, even if it meant tolerating Jan's presence. She only got worse as the years went on, becoming even more cruel and vindictive as time passed. The mental toll it took on me was enormous. I became this quiet, withdrawn version of myself, someone I didn't even recognize. Jan took my confidence, my joy, and crushed it beneath her heel. But I kept pushing through because the day would come when I could escape. College felt like my ticket out, an escape from the nightmare. And when I finally left for college, I was elated. I couldn't wait to be free from her, to live my life without the constant weight of her hatred hanging over me. And the fact that I was moving out of state made it even better. I could go home for the holidays, but I didn't have to deal with her on a daily basis anymore. That was the hope I clung to, and for a few years, it worked. After college, I graduated and started my career, still trying to maintain some kind of connection with my father, but always at a distance, always trying to keep things on his terms. I had to find a balance, somehow. But Jan? She only got worse, always trying to stir the pot, always trying to bait me into an argument. It reached a breaking point one day when I was visiting my father for lunch. She picked at me one too many times, and I lost it. We fought. It was the worst fight we'd ever had. And after that, things changed. My dad began inviting me over, but only when she wasn't around. It was like he finally saw what she was doing to me. But it was too late. The damage had already been done. And so, it went on. I still tried to maintain a relationship with him, though it wasn't easy. The only place we could meet was at restaurants or at his place when Jan wasn't there. It was strange, but it also felt like a relief not to have her poisoning every moment. My dad tried to keep the peace, but it was clear that he had chosen to see things through her eyes, even if that meant pushing me aside. Then Caleb came into the picture. I'd been dating him for a while when I decided it was time for him to meet my parents. We had dinner at my place for my birthday, just the three of us. Jan wasn't invited, of course. We were barely speaking at that point, and I didn't want to add more tension to an already fragile situation. I introduced Caleb to my dad, and they seemed to get along well. I was relieved. But Jan would never know about Caleb, not for a long time. After all the torment, after everything I endured, now my dad's threatening not to come to my wedding because I won't invite January. Honestly, can you even imagine that? After everything she put me through, and after our last fight, why would I even consider her part of this important moment in my life? We hadn't spoken in over 3 years, and she made no effort to fix things. Why would I invite someone who had no intention of making things right? It seemed absurd. But then the invitations went out, and not long after, my father called me. He said Jan was upset. Offended, even, that she hadn't received one. It was a small wedding. Caleb and I didn't want a lot of extra guests or drama. We wanted to keep it intimate, just the people who truly mattered. So, there was no way Jan was welcome. She wasn't even invited to the engagement party, which was all over social media, so she had to have known. Sure, I blocked her, but I know she heard about it from someone. My dad probably told her. I didn't buy her act of being in the dark. She had every chance to apologize. If she had, maybe, just maybe, I would have considered inviting her. But there was no apology. So why would I even consider it? Why should I? But my father, for some reason, thought I should invite her. She's my stepmother, he said. Ridiculous, right? I told him exactly what I thought, but he didn't budge. And the arguments, they went on for days. Days of frustration, of me trying to explain that she doesn't deserve to be there. That if I invited her, it would mean I accepted her as family. And I don't. I never will. Then yesterday, my dad hit me with it. If I didn't invite Jan to the wedding, he wouldn't come either. He said it was insulting that his wife wasn't included in such an important family event. I couldn't believe my ears. All this time, after everything she'd done, and he's still taking her side. After all those years of her bullying me, terrorizing me, this is the line he's drawing? This was the moment where I realized he wasn't ever going to put me first. I thought maybe, just maybe, after all the fights and hurt, he would finally come around, stand up for me. But no! After everything, he was still choosing her over me. I couldn't keep pretending it was anything else. So, I told him. I told him that it was probably better if he didn't attend at all. That I'd be rescinding his invitation. I told him that he was just as bad, if not worse, than January. She bullied me, yes. But he stood by and let it happen. He never defended me, never took my side. And I had foolishly believed that would change. I had been fooling myself for so long. I said I didn't want him at the wedding or ever again. I was done. Done trying to win his approval. Done with him choosing her over me. I hung up, shaking, and told Caleb everything. I needed to hear that I had done the right thing, that I wasn't the one in the wrong here. But I didn't know what would happen next. I thought he might come around, that he'd finally see it for what it was, but I was wrong. I couldn't keep waiting for him to realize the truth. And then his family reached out. They called, they texted, telling me I was ungrateful, that I owed him an apology. What was so ungrateful about standing up for myself? What was wrong with refusing to let myself be treated like a doormat anymore? I didn't owe anyone anything. Certainly not January. She was the one who ruined my childhood, and my dad never cared enough to do anything about it. I'm sorry, but I don't think it's unreasonable to draw the line here. To protect myself from the people who hurt me. My dad's side of the family clearly wants me to just accept things the way they've always been, to let him walk all over me for the sake of peace. But peace never came, not in all those years of silence and submission. And now they want me to just forget? Forget everything they ignored? I'm done with this. I know Caleb and my mother support me. They're helping me navigate through all of this, reminding me that I'm not wrong for setting boundaries. But my father's side? They want to tell me I'm ungrateful because he raised me? As if that should make me bend to his will now. They don't seem to care about the years of suffering, about how my dad let Jan bully me every single day. They want me to just smile and pretend none of that matters. I haven't been responding to anyone. What's the point? They've seen everything I've been through, and they still side with him. They want to whitewash his image, but I can't pretend anymore. I said what I needed to say, and I'm not going back on it. I won't apologize for standing up for myself, for cutting off a toxic relationship. And so, I've decided. I'm not going to invite my father to the wedding. I'm not going to allow Jan back into my life. Not after everything. I'm done. He either owns up to his mistakes or stays away from me. It's that simple. I'm not asking for much. I'm not demanding that he leave his wife, even though, deep down, I know that would be the right thing. After all, she's a horrible person, but I've been willing to be the bigger person. I told myself that if he could just apologize, if he could admit his wrongs, I'd allow him to attend my wedding. That's all I wanted, yet it seems that's too much to ask. I've realized now that it's never about righting the wrongs for him. It's about protecting his image, pretending to be the good guy. He doesn't care about being good, he just wants to be seen that way. I used to believe, with all my heart, that my father cared about me, that he was a decent human being. But I was wrong. A father who truly loved his daughter wouldn't stand by and let his wife tear her apart. And that's exactly what happened. He didn't just stand by, he let it happen, year after year, without ever stepping in. So, no, I'm not being ungrateful. I'm seeing things for what they are now. The wedding was getting closer, and I hadn't heard from my father in a month. His side of the family had stopped reaching out to me, stopped trying to convince me I was wrong. After a few days, they cut me off entirely. Honestly, I wasn't upset. If anything, it felt like a relief. At least I knew where they stood. They'd shown their true colors, and now I wouldn't have to worry about drama on my special day. But, of course, the peace was short-lived. I almost forgot about everything with my father, distracted by wedding planning, work, life. Until one day, he showed up at my house. I had no warning, no preparation. When he walked through the door, I wasn't sure what to expect. Apologies, maybe? I thought, for just a second, that he might finally acknowledge the hurt he'd caused. But no, it wasn't a real apology. He showed up, said a few words, if you could even call them that, and left after 3 long hours. We had an in-depth conversation, but it led nowhere. At least he finally admitted that Jan had been a bully, that he had let things slide when I was a kid, all because he didn't want to fight with her. To hear him say it, to have him admit the truth, it was almost refreshing. After all these years of being gaslighted into thinking I was somehow responsible for her cruelty, hearing him speak the truth felt like a breath of fresh air. But then, just when I thought he might apologize, he pulled back. He said he felt bad but couldn't actually apologize. Why? Because standing up to Jan meant he'd lose his normal life, and he didn't want to deal with the fallout. It wasn't the truth. He could have done something, anything, but he didn't. He chose to stay out of it. Gaslighting me was easier than confronting January. He didn't want to risk his own comfort, his own peace, by standing up for me. And all this time, he pretended he loved us both equally. The truth was, he loved Jan more. I wasn't about to let him manipulate me any longer. The days dragged on. My wedding day was drawing closer. No apologies, no change. And my father? Still silent. But then, just when I thought I could finally breathe easy, I learned that he and Jan had moved away to the suburbs. He had stopped responding to me. No explanation, no message. But somehow, he found the time to make promises he never intended to keep. He visited me, spoke of working on our relationship, and yet, nothing ever came of it. I should have known better. He's disappointed me so many times that it's become second nature to brace myself for it. But I won't let it hurt me anymore. I'm moving on. I'll focus on the people who care about me, the ones who show up when it counts, like my husband and my mother. Caleb and I are going on our honeymoon soon. That's all that matters now. The rest is in the past.